into positions of hopelessness and helplessness. The government gives them the drugs, builds bigger prisons, passes a 3-strike law, and then wants us to sing God Bless America. No, no, no. Not God Bless America. God damn America. That's in the Bible for killing innocent people. God damn America for treating us citizens as less than human. God damn America as long as she tries to act like she is God and she is supreme.
Hello and greetings, the damned. Welcome to Pod Damn America, the Gothic Socialist podcast for the stupid children. Hello, I'm Jake Flores, and Anders Lee is with me this week.
Anders Lee here.
All the way from DC, and special guest, long time coming, Eli Valley. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm glad we finally got you. At risk of going too dark too quick, something that's kind of funny that happened is that the last time we were gonna book you, I don't know if you remember, this was almost like a year ago. Okay. That's when our pal Raghav died that week, and I remember having to send you an email being like, "Shit's fucked up around here." Yeah. You know, well, we'll get you back some other time, and I'm glad we finally got you. But I feel like it's like almost kind of state of the fucked up world that you are like an evergreen guest on any podcast just because this thing that you kind of are talking about, this anti-Semitic shit that's happening, is just happening all the fucking time.
Right, gloom and doom guest.
Yeah. So it's opportune for a really bad reason that, at any given time, anyone can probably talk to you about the things that your cartoons are about.
I thought we were talking about comedy today.
We'll do a little bit of both.
What's your? How do you feel about the Puerto Rican rattlesnake? Have you had any run-ins with him? Louis J. Gomez and the Legion of Skanks?
No, I don't even know what this is about.
We'll get back around to that later. I did actually have one very important question I want to ask you up top as an illustrator. By the way, guys, if you don't know Eli Valley, obviously you should check out his work. He's an incredible illustrator.
Pause the podcast and Google him and take in some image.
Really cool, really intense, like kind of throwback imagery, illustrations about, but political cartoons about, what goes on in our corner of the left. Specifically, I'd say probably focus on like the cynical wielding of anti-Semitism by the media and the establishment and all that shit.
And the right. Yeah.
And the right, obviously. Yeah. But did want to ask you a question, which is, this Iran war is possibly starting because Trump fucking drone striked this guy Soleimani, and then the response last week, I don't know if you saw this, there's this cleric in Iran that said Iran can't strike back against the U.S. because all of our heroes are fictional. And then he went on to go, what are we going to do, assassinate SpongeBob SquarePants? Right. As an illustrator, how do you respond to this threat on our beloved cartoon SpongeBob SquarePants?
Yeah, that's good. He was like trolling. He was clearly a troll, and he was, because Trump is for all of his racism and criminality, he is good at trolling. At least, that's one thing he's good at, or at least he has people on his staff who are good at trolling. And so, but that's sort of up the game. But I do hope everyone recognizes if. I don't want to get in trouble for, anything illegal, but
it's already happened on this show. It's fine.
This was a, Pompeo probably advised him, but it's pretty independent Trump action, and Trump has properties throughout the world, and it's insane that anyone would ever step foot in a Trump property because the man is in my view, I don't even think it's a view. He's a treasonous crook, and. And I hope, adversaries in the world understand that Americans are not, I like to think we are not as vile as the Trump criminal organization.
I don't know if you saw this a couple days ago. This piece came out in the Daily Beast called "Attacking Trump Tower?" ? Would Iran be that reckless?
I saw that piece, and someone else mentioned that it was like fan fiction because the way it was like so speculative and almost like excited about it. I didn't really understand if there was any evidence for it. It was just like talking out of their ass, right?
I mean, it's kind of funny, but also I think it is maybe a wildly reckless thing to publish in a major publication because, like, Not that that's gonna happen, but if it did, you could be held like culpable for like, because the thing is, like, symbolically we would all think it was pretty funny, right? But people work in that shit who aren't him.
Yeah. I mean, was there any evidence for it, or was he just like saying, this is what they could do?
I think it was just someone's weird ass opinion piece.
Yeah. I mean, I do
It's
think
like highly.
Sorry.
Yeah, there's people speculating about him attacking New York. There's been all these tweets from dudes who are like, "Bring it on! I work in Manhattan."
I saw that
Eat
thing,
me."
but that creepy Federalist writer. But in terms of like Trump Tower, I felt that De Blasio should eminent domain that shit for years now, and you can just make up whatever because we have a lawless president. So why not just take it and make it public housing, right?
Yeah. Oh man, that would be fucking great.
Yeah. If we had a mayor who wasn't, in bed with real estate, Trumpian real estate tycoons, maybe he'd have some balls in the matter.
Yeah.
I bet de Blasio will like talk about doing that right when he leaves office. He'll be like, "Wouldn't that have been a great idea?"
Yeah, exactly.
But
now they can do it under the auspices of safety. It's like, you know what? We can't have a Trump because they're all targets now. And so for public safety, it's now public housing.
Yeah, we have to put the homeless people in the most dangerous thing you can live in. Which
No, but it won't be Trump anymore. So therefore, it's not a target.
Right. Fair.
Yeah. Mar-a-Lago, though, hey.
Either of you guys ever seen the cartoon The Venture Brothers? I don't know why this just popped into my head.
I saw their other stuff, not the Venture Brothers. What's the other one?
That's the Adult Swim guys. They do like
the Skeletor type guy trying to destroy the world. I forget what that one was. I've never seen the Venture Brothers though.
Metalocalypse or something. I don't know. Anyways, there's like there's a new season of the Venture Brothers. These cartoons been going on forever. They moved their super science lab to this new building, and it's a tower in New York. And it's very subtle. I didn't notice it until I just rewatched it the other night. But it's Trump Tower, and I don't know. That show's very clever. They do like very small things, and then the entire season is the fucking Trump Tower ostensibly getting blown up and shit.
Really? Was it after Trump's election?
Yeah. I think that's why they did it. It's very clever. But anyway, before we get into politics, I want to ask you a little bit about like your style of illustration in general, because I I'm not a huge head, but I'm sure I got a lot of fans that are also into like comics and stuff like that, and like Art Spiegelman, stuff like that. R. Crumb, I guess. Fritz the Cat was really big on me when I was a kid.
Oh, yeah.
What are your inspirations, to ask the hackiest question ever, and like how'd you get into to illustrating?
Well, I mean, I often say that the 1950s Mad comics, before the Comics Code was established that pushed Mad into becoming a magazine, arguably.
Yeah.
In like between 1952 and 54, they were just like, it was made by these New Yorkers in like downtown Manhattan. It's now a Duane Reade and condos where they had their offices on Lafayette Street, and they were putting out these like horror comics and science fiction comics, and then they started doing these satirical comics under Mad, with these greats like Harvey Kurtzman and Bill Elder, who are like my heroes of illustration. And like Bill Elder would like throw he would crowd every panel with so much nonsense. He actually called it chicken fat or schmaltz, because or chicken fat I think was specifically what he referred to it as. Just like all this like little stuff everywhere, and it was just like this cacophony that reflected the immigrant experience at the time, and the visual medium of just absolute anarchy within the panels themselves, while taking on sometimes they're taking on bullshit American icons, but they were also taking on consumerism, conformity, and McCarthyism, and in pretty sometimes subversive, sometimes in your face manner.
Cool. Yeah.
And what was the immigrant aspect there? I wasn't aware of that.
Well, I mean, I didn't want to get too ethnocentric this soon on a non-Jewish podcast, but they're basically all Jewish, and they were all like children of immigrants on the Lower East Side and in Brooklyn. And to me, it did reflect a lot of the Yiddish. I mean, I talk about this in my presentation. I don't want to like repeat myself, but it reflects a lot of the sort of Yiddish culture of like tenements and sort of like people living on top of each other within like very small scale quarters. Their panels sort of reflect the way of life at the time, and also I mean just in terms of Yiddish, they actually threw Yiddish into their comics. They made up new Yiddish words that became part of the Mad lexicon. Other Yiddish words just became part of the American lexicon because of Mad, and so
interesting.
Yeah, I mean. They like potrzeby. I mean, potrzeby. It just means like a need. I think it's Polish, but I mean, they made it into this like 1950s slang. Verschlagener is an invented Yiddish term. It just means like fucking or damn it, or like just a superfluous adjective.
Yeah.
They threw in so a lot of their words like they just made up words, but they had like sort of a Yiddish background and inflection to them.
Sure. Yeah. No, it makes total sense to me because I'm like, I'm a big comedy head, but I also am like from. Texas, where there's not like a lot of Jewish people, or at least there weren't around when I grew up. So I was always like, how did some of this stuff get into my head? But then I, through like learning about the history of comedy and stuff like what you're describing, but also like stuff like what they wrote into like the early Simpsons, I've been able to trace back like all this stuff that goes back to stuff like you're describing, and then also like early radio. Like something that's really interesting about the early Simpsons years is like you'll hear. The guy walks into a manhole and he says something like "down I go," and then you talk to one of the writers from back then and they tell you, okay, so I was really into early radio comedy, like radio plays, and that's the type of thing you would hear on radio plays. You go, holy shit, wow. That's how that got in my head.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
Yeah.
One of my favorites.
Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say shout out one of my favorite Simpsons clips when Bart visits the Mad office and they're like, "Oh, this is just a bunch of boring paperwork," and then you see Alfred E. Newman going around on a unicycle and stuff.
That's what I thought about immediately when you were describing the actual office. I was like, it's real.
Yeah, I should also say that in 1954, because of congressional hearings and a Catholic crusade against immorality, including in the comics industry, the comics industry imposed a self-regulating, self-neutering body called the Comics Code. That little seal of approval you see on comics in the upper right, or at least you used to until maybe a few years ago. And so then, so that was 1954, and the underground comics started emerging in the 1960s, and so they emerged really as a direct response to the self-regulating, self-censoring Comics Code Authority. And so people like R. Crumb and Art Spiegelman as well, like a whole slew, Charles Burns, of these people who were inspirational for me, actually also came from the Mad aesthetic of the 1950s.
Cool. Yeah. I remember reading in Mouse, I read like an edition of it that had a bunch of his biographical stuff in it. Yeah. And he talked about going by Art Speg at one point to like downplay the Jewishness of his name.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah, which I guess that maybe plays into the history of how you had to go underground or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, this is, I don't know if you want to talk about this later, but there was this disgusting smear organization called Stop Anti-Semites that they recently named Ilhan Omar Anti-Semite of the Year.
Right, yeah. She did it. She got the trophy.
Yeah. A few weeks ago, they named me Anti-Semite of the Week, and they thought it was some kind of burn to use my full name, Eliezer,
Yeah.
So it's similar. I think they were either,
Eli Hussein.
Yeah, exactly. They were either, it was like anti-Semitic on their part. Either they were trying to dox me, or they think that's doxing me as if I'm like living some kind of anonymous online life, or they were trying to imply that I'm hiding my Jewish roots as if I am pretending to not be Jewish in my comics.
Ellie, I don't know if that would be entirely possible for you, man.
I know. That's why it was absurd. Look at Eliezer. Wow, gee, you got me. I'm exposed.
Yeah. I think it's also just through your work, it's pretty clear what you're saying and stuff. Yeah. I mean, I did want to talk about just the absurd, cynical wielding of this concept of anti-Semitism that we've seen, just recently in taking down Corbyn across the pond, but then also here, like there definitely was I feel like there was an uptick right after Corbyn lost where they started to think, oh, we can really use this against Bernie, for example, which is insane because he's a Jew.
Well, I mean, I don't even think saying I'm Jewish is a sufficient defense against these bad faith accusations of anti-Semitism. You know, when people attack me for this, and I get people in the reply saying, "Oh, he's Jewish. How can you say that?" It's not sufficient. You need to go at the actual bullshit, the distortions and the lies that they put forward in order to smear people, and not just say he's Jewish. You know?
Yeah.
In my opinion, just in order to to scorch the earth when they try and smear anyone.
No, that's a really good point.
So your method is to sort of try to zero in on the accusation and try to examine what they're actually saying, instead of, because of course this is a serious issue. Like, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like, anti-Semitism is a huge problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's a case by case basis, but I'm just saying you can be Jewish and anti-Semitic, and I say, Ben Shapiro, who is considered the paragon of Judaism because he wears a yarmulke and because he supports apartheid, he's like, oh, he's the official Jew. Meanwhile, he went on a proto-Nazi podcast trashing Hollywood Jews as attempting to destroy Christendom. This is like the kind of thing that is like out of Nazi propaganda, but because he wears a yarmulke, he gets a free pass on that shit, and that needs to stop happening. So that's an example of like a Jew can be anti-Semitic.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a really good point, because I think the reason that it starts, it's just like it's so alarming when you hear these things lobbied against someone who isn't one of these Ben Shapiros and is a Jew, and you go, how can this possibly? But you're right, the argument should start where it starts, which is that it's a bad faith
lie
pretext to begin with, or whatever.
Exactly.
Another one of those people I guess I should bring up, because he's been in my life recently, is Milo Yiannopoulos, because what happened with me is this fucking edgelord podcast in down the street or whatever in our own goddamn community here decided to have Milo Yiannopoulos on as a guest.
Really? When was that?
This was back in like March or May. It was in spring of last year. It was I think it was the last time I saw you. It was at that fucking party. It was like right before that, because I remember that, 'cause I was pissed off about it that day, because what happened is these comics, and like there's plenty of there is a tradition in comedy of fucking having these edgy guests. You watch Bill Maher, and he has on fucking, let's have two extreme opposites or whatever. Platforming a guest like that is not really like entirely the problem in and of itself, but they did it at a club I hang out at, and that a lot of comedians hang out at, and so like I was one of a number of people who kind of made it known to like the club, like, hey, fuck you, like I'm not gonna hang out in your fucking bar if you have alt-light and alt-right and neo-Nazi types hanging out there or whatever. And the weight of the entire thing came down on my head for some reason, just because I'm a politically outspoken person, and so then they try to paint it into a situation where like I threatened them because I made a joke about going to their show and throwing a milkshake at them because they had it at a bar,
Right.
What if they serve milkshakes? Anyway, this has caused me to look in great detail into who Milo Yiannopoulos is, because I was aware of him obviously because he's Milo Yiannopoulos, but I want to kind of get a little bit of a closer look at his entire thing, what he's selling or whatever, because I did get into a lot of arguments this year with people who would try to tell me, well, he's a Jew and he's gay and he's married to a black guy, therefore he can't be any of these things. On 3 bases. Yeah.
Is he Jewish? I don't know his I heard maybe he says that he has some Jewish lineage, but I didn't really follow
He's
it.
Greek. He's Greek, and they're sometimes thought of as Jews by ignorant people.
He's also a lie. Is that
the entire basis of it? Because I don't know if he actually had a Jewish
I think so. That's what I'm surmising.
Well, he's also a liar, and I think he's self-described provocateur or whatever. So he writes a lot of this off as like, "Oh, I said I was Jewish just to fuck with you" or whatever. But unless I'm wrong,
I've heard that too, but I didn't know. I didn't really research enough. What was the podcast that he went on that was at the bar?
It's called Legion of Skanks. This is run by 3 idiots.
Is it still around?
Oh yeah, okay. One of them came to one of my shows and spit in my face the other day.
Really?
Yep.
I saw you had some stuff online with the comedy people that I did not I don't really know
if you
these people are.
if you don't have the context for it, I'm sure what we're all tweeting at each other looks like complete fucking nonsense.
Well, I imagine it's the way Gentiles feel when they read my tweets.
Yeah.
I just want to throw this out there. Like, Jake and this guy are just very drawable. I'm just putting that on the table.
Okay.
Dude,
This
yeah.
guy goes by. This guy goes by the Puerto Rican rattlesnake, and he's spat on Jake.
He's the person of the podcast.
I will commission a drawing of Louis J. Gomez. Oh, that would fucking rule. But I do know that Milo is a Zionist.
Well, I mean, Richard Spencer is a Zionist. I mean, but what were we going to say? I mean,
well, I've got the interview he did right here.
Because Zionism is no defense against charges of anti-Semitism. In fact, sometimes it's actually evidence of it.
Oh, that's I totally agree. But okay, no. To get all the way back around to what I was going to get at is in this, he did an interview in the Jewish Journal where he talks about his quote unquote Jewish identity, Trump, and Zionism in Berlin. That's what it is. So he is claiming to be Jewish, but
when is that from?
July 2019, so about 6 months ago.
Wow, I'm surprised they would interview this guy.
Yeah, I mean, well, see, that's the thing. He's in the Jewish Journal. He was at the Creek in the Cave. I think he's, maybe there's like only a handful of places he can even work anymore. And so he's just working his way around to people that maybe haven't heard of him or something.
Jewish Journal in L.A.?
This is JewishJournal.com.
I mean, I assume it's that.
Yeah, I couldn't.
Okay.
You probably know better than me.
One place he could possibly get away with working, or someone like him could, is the White House, because there are a lot of people who are pro-Israel, who are surrounding themselves with the Trump and his friends, who are like Christian Zionists, who like big defenders of the state of Israel, but are also like sort of anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about sort of the influence of Christian Zionism, quote unquote, on Trump's policy with Israel?
Yeah. Is that okay?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I couldn't tell if you were trying to get into another further mile thing. It's interesting because, like the anti-Semitic claim that, Jews, that Jews are controlling foreign policy or that Trump is doing things for Jews is actually belied by the fact that probably the most powerful Zionist organization in America is Christians United for Israel, just in terms of sheer numbers,
right,
and the amount of money that they raise. Like Trump's not doing shit for the Jewish vote for sure, but the evangelicals and white supremacists are his base. Evangelical Christians, and if not evangelical, then Christian Zionists. But evangelicals are, one of the groups that whose support for Trump has been really, rock solid. I mean, maybe it's had a couple chips lately with that Christianity Today op-ed or the editor's piece, right? But generally speaking, they made their pact with the devil, and if there was a hell, they'd be burning everlastingly.
Yeah, it's weird. No matter how many times I point out to them that they're hypocrites for that, they don't change their minds. What's going on?
So I mean, just like in general, evangelical Christians support Israel for theological reasons. We make a lot of the theological underpinnings of once Jesus comes back, then Jews and other so-called infidels will have a choice of conversion or death. But even aside from that, I mean, because it's all fantasy realm anyway. Everyone can have their fantasies. But what they're supporting today, aside from that, is like they're so filled also with extreme racism against Palestinians and against Arabs, more broadly,
right,
that they advocate for unadulterated apartheid throughout there, and it's a bad influence on the region, obviously. But Israel, especially Israel's current autocratic leaders, are happy to take any kind of assistance they can get, whether it's from them or from fascists in Hungary or from Trump.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I'm curious though about the term Zionism, because this is a point I heard Norman Finkelstein making a few months ago, which is that it's kind of it kind of is a distraction, just the word Zionism, because we get hung up on what that means, what the connotations are. It's a very nebulous term that means a lot of things. Do you think it's still useful to identify oneself as a Zionist or an anti-Zionist? Do you think we should just try to focus on Israel and Netanyahu's policies in particular?
Maybe. I haven't really thought about it that way. I do think there are different forms of Zionism, and if you identify or if you define Zionism as the struggle to create a Jewish state in that part of the world, then that has been created, and therefore there's no reason to call yourself a Zionist now. But of course, Zionism within the Jewish identity sphere has many more connotations, including that Jewish culture and human aspiration can only be fulfilled in Israel, and that I get into this in Diaspora Boy a lot, and in all my work really. Jews who disagree with that premise and who decide to fulfill themselves in diaspora are self-hating and are destined to failure and they're actually a threat. I mean, what we've seen since the origins of Zionism is an attack, an absorption of anti-Semitic attitudes from the outside world, and also an attack on diaspora Jews that we've seen culminating now in the most vicious kinds of rhetoric coming out of Israeli politicians and Israeli intellectuals, so to speak, against diaspora Jews. Like after Pittsburgh, after the horror, the most horrific massacre, anti-Semitic massacre in American history, Israel sends over minister after minister to thank Trump and to deny the existence or the rise of anti-Semitism. I mean, their diaspora minister literally said that the ADL of all places, that their figures on the rise of anti-Semitism are not to be trusted. I mean, it's like pernicious. I mean, they're not on our side. The myth is that Zionism will save the Jews of the world. We're seeing the opposite coming true.
Yeah. Wait, whose figures are not to be trusted?
Oh, the ADL, Anti-Defamation League.
Right.
Sorry, I gotta for this podcast.
No, sorry.
It's not a Jewish podcast.
No, I do know ADL. Okay. Although my listeners are very stupid, so it doesn't hurt if we over-explain to them.
I remember the first time I heard. The first time I heard Anti-Defamation League, I was just like, "Oh, that sounds great. Defamation, no good. Let's stamp that out." But the history behind them is a little more nefarious, right? Or a lot of their causes are not so good.
Yeah. They're like an extremely bad example, but even this is maybe a bad example, but there's like the ACLU is somebody you're like, oh, I'm totally for that, and then suddenly they're defending Nazis, and you go, what?
Yeah. But, I mean, that's a different case than ADL. With ADL, I mean, they were bad during apartheid South Africa. They were bad with police training in Israel, stuff like that program they have. They're bad in terms of equating anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism, and both sidesing the white supremacist horror show that we're living in.
I want to talk a little bit about something that is I see a lot in your work. I'm looking at some of your stuff right now, and there's always like these pictures of like Meghan McCain just saying like, that refugee girl wants to exterminate us Jews, I guess in reference to like Ilhan Omar and stuff like that, and this thing that I think Milo is probably doing where, like, he's outright just claiming to be Jewish, where you can't really tell what the fuck's going on with him. His background is kind of murky. I did look into it today, and like even the thing where his supporters all say he's dating a black man or he's married to a black man or whatever. I did meet a bartender one time. This is entirely anecdotal, so who knows whether this is true or not. But I met a bartender one time who said that he was at a bar and a bunch of Proud Boys walked in, and he sort of ended up at their table, and they thought he was one of them, and they were talking pretty openly about how that's like a fake person, like it's not a real thing.
Really? Oh, interesting.
But this is also a story I heard in a bar, so who knows?
Right.
Anyway,
you think there'd be pictures of, because he's a celebrity within those definitions, whatever.
Yeah, well,
so you think there'd be some photos of them out there.
Well, he uses the existence of this person to try to bat away these arguments. Well, I can't possibly be homophobic and all
Canadian
this
girlfriend,
stuff, racist and stuff.
Boyfriend.
But the details of it online are still very murky, so that leads me to believe I think what is going on with Milo is that he's in the alt-light category, and that he's a bit of like he's doing somewhat of a really fucked up version of performance art some of the time, and just sort of like using this stuff to just keep a pro wrestling style, like what is it called, like a heel thing alive.
Yeah, I just want to say,
He's also
I think it's. Oh, I'm sorry.
I think he's a dick. I
think he might be a little bit more alt-light today, but back, when he was at Breitbart, he was the bridge to the actual alt-right, and Steve Bannon was, conferring with him about how to adopt the ideas of, essentially Nazism, to a broader readership and audience, and he's vile. I mean,
he's horrible.
He does like really terrible doxing and harassment campaigns against people, and it's ugly.
Which is why they should serve milkshakes at the Creek in the Cave, baby. Yeah, no, for sure. He ghost wrote for people that wrote for like fucking Daily Stormer and shit like that. I mean, if you want to platform him, you should put up a fucking chicken wire fence, dude. Because
right, or it's
I don't know about this shit.
If you're, I mean, I'm a little bit murky on the idea that you could platform somebody and just like demolish them and like actually show how ridiculous their ideas are, but that wasn't going to happen here. That didn't happen on Bill Maher. That doesn't happen 90% of the time these people are put on air. I think if they had put them on, I think this is ultimately what happened when they platform Milo. It usually just ends up, you look at him as this sort of like, oh, look at this novelty person with these sort of like eccentric, quirky views about the world. You don't actually get a chance to, or they don't really take the chance to challenge him on his bullshit.
Mm-hmm. One thing I noticed about this whole ordeal with Legion of Skanks and shit is that, what they are is a bunch of dumb guys that are comedians that I would argue have an ideology but don't think ideologically. You can't not have one, but they fall into where their like little privileged position lands them, which is they're very individualistic. They're very like, you should be able to do whatever you want, but mostly when that applies to me as a guy and all this stuff, right? But I think that they came from the point of view of, we're going to platform this because this is an offensive thing to do, and the joke is how offensive it is because he's so horrible. But a year into arguing with their fans about this sort of stuff, I would have anyone fucking look and notice how the message shifted from, this is funny because he's so horrible, to he's actually pretty cool. Because in the comments or the fucking reply guys for their podcast that I've been arguing with and have been fucking with me online all this last year or whatever, an alarming number of them are pretty okay with the person Milo Yiannopoulos and are not even defending this as like a joke. They're like, well, how can you actually call him a Nazi, etc. So fucking slippery slope with those media shit, right? We should probably talk a little bit about this rally on Sunday, and then of course a couple of media things that happened after that fall in line with what we're talking about. Could you tell me a little bit about the event?
There was a rally organized by major Jewish organizations in New York, and I guess like national organizations as well, following recent spate of anti-Semitic attacks and killings. Both in maybe on a practically daily basis in Brooklyn, and also the Jersey City massacre and what happened in Muncie immediately prior to the rally. I guess it was a few days prior, in which a man wielding a machete went into either a synagogue or a rabbi's house on the last day of Hanukkah, and I think one person is still in a coma from that. And so the rally, was a solidarity and an action rally. So on paper, there's nothing to. It's a good thing. The problem was that they had some speakers there who are overt racists and who have like made careers on being racist, and
the Legion of Skanks were speaking at the
that was a bad choice.
The solidarity.
Yeah. People who are basically 3 years. Are we 3 years into the Trump administration?
Yep.
Into this white supremacist horror, really craving an opportunity to pretend that this virus and horror that we are living in is actually a both sides issue. And so, because the assailants in Muncie and in Jersey City were black, that alone is like, oh, so this is the anti-Semitism on the left because black people are all leftists, right? I mean, that's exactly. I mean, almost verbatim. Even like Louis Farrakhan, who, in the, of Nation of Islam, in the, community, what do you call it? Like social service programs, Nation of Islam, that might intersect with some like, lefty orgs. But Louis Farrakhan himself is a right-wing figure. I think he supported Trump. I'm not sure of that. But definitely his views are probably indistinguishable from Michael Pence's when it comes to, theocratic.
Thank you for using his full name.
Yeah.
Michael Pence.
What is it, Mike? I don't even know. I forget it.
For some reason, he goes by Mike, which is very casual for Mike Pence.
So
I bet his name is like actually Mike. It's not Michael. It's legally Mike.
Michaela.
Yeah.
Some
Wait, before I forget though, the Muncie attack, came out, his journals and his web searches. I mean, I think that Jersey City, they were a division of Black Israelites, which is also not a lefty organization.
Right.
But the one in Muncie, he was doing Google searches for Zion temples or Zionist temples, and looking up Hitler, looking up like why did Hitler hate the Jews, things like that. And to say that that is leftist is preposterous. But here's the thing, we should have had this rally before the inauguration.
Right.
We should have had this Solidarity rally. It's good to have a rally now. It's not good to have a rally that features racists. But I do think that a lot of the reason behind the rally was, unfortunately, I mean, obviously, this is we need a rally when there was these attacks. We should have had the rally much sooner. And I think a lot of Jews on the right who have put in their lot and their energies and their resources and their ideological commitments with basically the hero of American Nazism, and they've been called this by the majority of the American Jewish community. We don't have the strength in terms of actual organizations, but we have the strength of numbers. And they were desperate to find a way to both sides, this nightmare. And so they just started screaming that the left, even when the left was, I was in Brooklyn, like either that night or the night after when there was a Solidarity rally, a smaller one with Chabad and Grand Armory Plaza and JFREJ, Jews for Racial and Economic Justice here. And they were just making stuff up. The opinion editor of the Forward is saying the left doesn't care when it's Orthodox people who are killed because the people, the victims of the attacks in Brooklyn and in Muncie and Jersey City have been Orthodox or Hasidic. So it's like they're spreading these lies that we only care when it's white nationalists who are committing the crimes, and they're spreading lies that that the assailants are coming out of a lefty ideology to supplement the lies that they've been giving us for the past 3 years and longer, but especially under Trump, that BDS is anti-Semitic and that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitic and that there is no safe space for Jews on college campuses today because Jewish Voice for Peace believes that Palestinian pregnant women shouldn't die at checkpoints while giving birth.
Yeah.
I also heard that at the rally there was a lot of time dedicated to Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib. Just talking about them.
Yeah.
Well, they had to be awarded their trophies for anti-Semitism. I like how they have it of the month, of the year, like it's an employee thing too. Like she won every month.
Well, I got for that week, and so I don't know if I was in the finalist competition, but they had some college student from GW in DC. He was speaking because his Zionist views were not acceptable in Jewish Voice for Peace or something. I don't know. He's pretending that he's a victim because his ideology is execrable, and that's not anti-Semitism. Because I talked to people at GW. I spoke at GW in December. Yeah. They're like, this is a fucking farce. He of course, because of Barry Weiss at the New York Times, he wrote an op-ed piece for the Times about how he is a victim at GW.
Right.
And so he was one of the speakers. Barry Weiss was one of the speakers. It was, like her bat mitzvah ceremony. She was saying over and over, "I am a Jew because of this, I'm a Maccabees." And then she went, or before she gave her speech, she went while on the march. She was interviewed by Brian Stelter on CNN Reliable Sources, I guess, or just CNN, I don't know, and pivoted to how Bernie Sanders she implied he's an anti-Semite because Linda Sarsour, she said, has a close relationship with Louis Farrakhan, which is a lie. So Barry Weiss lied to millions of people in America to paint Bernie as an anti-Semite. It was the Corbyn playbook on live television at a rally in which we are supposed to be united against the anti-Semitism, that's spreading throughout the country. That's the kind of thing where that's the kind of thing where it just shows like the
people just have no respect for the identity or the concept of being Jewish. Like, didn't Cuomo a while back say he was like more Jewish than someone? I'm gonna look this up.
Or he said that he made a joke about Jews not being able to dance.
Yeah, he also said, "I'm a Jew," or "all Jews," or something. I think, right?
Look it up.
I mean,
he was like, "I'm a Jew. I'm a woman of color." Yeah.
Right.
I'm thinking of someone else. Someone just said, "I'm more of a Jew than so and so is." A non-Jew said that about somebody.
Yeah, I don't remember that happened in the past couple of weeks. I don't remember who it was though. It sounds very familiar though.
Yeah, the news.
People have been calling Bernie a fake Jew for a while now.
Yeah, but now they're upping the ante, which is why I don't think the defense should be, "Oh, he's Jewish, you can't call him that." It should be, "Oh, Barry, you're actually lying on Brooklyn Bridge about someone who could become the first Jewish president because you're afraid because he says, maybe we shouldn't be so one-sided in our approach to Israel-Palestine."
Apologies to Jewish, black, queer, trans, disabled woman Andrew Cuomo. I was Rudy Giuliani said it. Rudy Giuliani said, I'm more of a Jew than George Soros is.
I drew a comic about it. I can't believe I didn't remember this. So much has happened since then. That was literally like 2 weeks ago.
It was December 24th. Yeah.
Yeah, and now we're at war with Iran and all this other shit that's been going on.
Well, you did crank out those comics.
Yeah, but I mean, it's amazing how you start to live in an atomized fashion from one crisis to the next. Like the whole country's been, if you're paying it, if you're someone who is absorbed in what's happening in the news,
Yeah.
I am curious, though, if you feel like things have changed over the past 10, 15 years in terms of the way we can talk about Israel in the public sphere in America. Because, I remember just in 2006, I think it was, Jimmy Carter was just canceled before that was a thing for releasing this book with a very mild critique of Israel.
Right.
And now, of course, there's a lot of histrionics with, the Barry Weisses in the world and stuff. But in general, do you think there's more of a space for this type of criticism?
It's a tough one because I think I need to think about it a little bit more. But I off the top of my head, I feel like there is more space for the criticism, but there's also more space for these wild accusations of anti-Semitism at the same time. So I think maybe the Overton window has shifted a bit in terms of being able to talk about apartheid, essentially. But the reaction has been much, and maybe it's because we're talking about it more, but I mean, now they're trying to criminalize free speech on college campuses. That's pretty extreme as well. So, that's like taking further liberties than I remember being taken just 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah, I mean that might be in response to the growth of the movement.
It might be. Yeah, actually.
They're freaking out. Yeah, they don't know what to do.
Yeah. I mean, I've been called a self-hater since I started drawing comics, but the vitriol and the hatred and the dehumanization and literally likening me to although I've always been called a Nazi, to be honest, but I mean, like the amplification of these smears has really gone up in the past year, and I think it's because they saw that. I don't want to, self-aggrandize, but post Meghan McCain imbroglio, I think they want my voice to be less amplified, and so one way to do that is to make me toxic by spreading these lies, not just the Nazi shit. They're pretending I'm a misogynist, pretending that I abetted murder. I mean, there's this one person online.
You go on podcasts, so you're assumed guilty of all of these things.
Yeah. No. I mean, it could be because they're looking for a good smear to use. So there's one person, Ariel Sobel, who was finally caught making a fake sock puppet account of a black Jewish woman. It was her trying to get sending threats to herself to try and implicate the left. So she'd been going and saying Eli's a misogynist because his fans send me misogynistic things, and then sending a screen cap of she says a DM, but it's actually a text. And I didn't even want to touch that stuff because I don't want to, I definitely do not want to doubt anyone who is saying this happened, but to say that, say that was me or that I directed it, which is bullshit. She's like, oh, because you drew Meghan McCain misogynistically, your fans are using the C word at me, you know? I'm like, first of all, these, you know, if they're my fans, you know, it's like, I'm not controlling these people. I don't know who they are. And anytime that kind of thing would happen with my name attached to it, I completely condemn it, you know? So it's like, it's just this bullshit smear. And after it came out, and I'm sorry if this is totally in the weeds for your podcast.
No, please.
After it came out, she created this.
We don't have a lot of parameters on this show.
Okay. after it came out that she made a fake sock puppet account in order to, you know, demonize the left. Then it's like, oh, well, maybe even the text messages that she claimed that she was getting from my so-called fans, those were all made up too, you know. But you'll never know, because within the Jewish right, there is zero accountability. She's now, when you mentioned Jewish Journal, that's why I was wondering. She's working at the Los Angeles Jewish Journal now, despite, writing these, you know, these fabrications, lies, and smears. I mean, it's like, it's McCarthy shit, and now she has a job. And the Forward, of all places, picked up her. She had another one saying that I was influential in the Dayton murders because the killer retweeted me along with Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, and hundreds of other people. Because he retweeted me, that means I must have been what set him over the edge to murder.
Oh, he retweeted me too.
Really?
Yeah.
So the Forward wrote a piece saying Dayton killer retweeted former Forward contributor Eli Valley. It's like, what the fuck are you doing? You know?
Yeah.
And there's been no article in any of the Jewish press about about the campaign. And it wasn't just her. It was like all of these like toxic figures that are like in this coterie of like spreading smears. Nothing has been written about it. It's like there's no investigative journalistic sort of fire within the community, and we need it more than ever now.
Yeah, I mean, I like that you mentioned McCarthyism, because it's like something that's far enough in the past and was like, you know, fucking crazy, but by comparison to this, it was at so much of a slower rate than all this misinformation and weird smears and shit, that it makes me wonder if we can look at that and sort of compare and contrast and, you know, draw any lessons. But I guess what's alarming to me about all this like online drama and you know, your ability to misrepresent everything and really create these these arguments where you can't possibly prove the other side wrong by just saying, well, their fans did this, and then they're using these vague things of misogyny or whatever. Seeing it happen against Corbyn, seeing it happen against the left here, even seeing the bare mechanisms of it at work within this extremely dumb fight that I have with this other podcast, it kind of makes me wonder, like, is it even possible to account for any of this stuff, or is this just a new landscape that we're all just going to have to work within and operate on the base assumption that if you are fucking right about anything and you're threatening to anyone, especially anyone in the establishment, in the media, in any way, and all of this, that we just have to assume that they're just going to hurl these unprovable things at all of us all the time, and that's just the way it is. Because what I'm wondering in all this is, I mean, I know who you are. I'm a fucking fan of your work, and like, to me, it's absurd, the idea that they would call you any of these things. But do these smears pass off to just random people who don't know about any of this stuff? That they're just, you know, the mention of either of us is just a fucking blip on their radar or whatever. Do you think that's a real problem?
Well, it depends. I mean, it depends who you're referring to as a random person, you know? I mean, a random person doesn't know, you couldn't place Israel on a map, you know?
Sure,
probably.
Yeah.
So, but, you know, people who are somewhat well-versed in these things, yes. I mean, like, you know, I mean, for me, like, Ariel Sobel is just like, you know, it's not a person of significance in terms of a voice in the community, despite the smears that she was orchestrating. But someone like Barry Weiss is an extremely powerful figure because of the New York Times, and because of the New York Times' refusal to hold their columnists to account, any sort of accountability.
It really is like anything goes over there.
Yeah. It's like babysitting hour, but the kids can just like set the house on fire, and it's okay because they're these you know, they're the golden childs, you know, her and Bret.
I was gonna say, speaking of Bret, we might talk about his recent column a little bit.
But I just want to quickly say, when Barry spreads these smears, when she amplifies the lie that I am mimicking Nazis in my art, that has effects that permeates the sort of like more low information absorbers in the country and the world. And so when they hear my name, they make more of a quick assumption. That's the goal. That's and that's why it's unconscionable that James Bennett allows this shit to happen under his watch. Not just to me, but I mean the stuff that Bret Stephens does. I mean it's absurd, but it's also tragic. It does have an effect. And so when people say, "Oh, well, you're so obsessed with this," it's go fuck yourself, because it actually it impairs my ability to live, to survive.
Oh, believe me, I know all about it, man.
Yeah,
and
okay.
People like to say like fucking oh, Twitter's not real or whatever, and it's like, I mean, it is in some ways and is not in other ways, but it's very much, if you work on in the like weird anything resembling the media, it's very real to those people, and because it's really real to those people, they're able to to recklessly permeate these rumors that damage your reputation. And then
and also it's a disservice to survivors, to people, to victims of actual toxic, violent, abusive people. It's like it's taking real trauma and exploiting it and weaponizing it against people who are totally removed from that in order to push your own ideological agenda.
Yeah. And I mean, not to like use the most fucking annoying beat to death comparison ever, but I keep thinking about this because people say, oh, it's not real, like log off and whatever. But like, I meet people sometimes that seem like they kind of pay attention to politics, and then I ask them, and then they often have this weird thing where they're like, yeah, Bernie Sanders, his supporters are misogynist. I go, where'd you get that from? Oh, from these people who know that they can use these smears that are like impossible to disprove, because sure, someone within that giant fucking sample of people probably has been at some point.
Yeah.
And it's just as a mechanism, just kind of used against all of us all the time.
Yeah,
it just fucking sucks.
I do think that the people I was referring to before, they saw the sort of like the stereotype of the Burning Pro, and they're like, well, let's use that. And partly because I did illustrations for Chapo, they're like, okay, let's get him on that. I think it was part of their thought process of how to get me.
That being said, I do support Bernie Sanders, and I do hate women. I just want everyone to know I'm very misogynist, which is why I support him. I'm just gonna go with that from here forward. Fuck it, I'll just keep saying it. Let's talk a little bit. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna
say.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. I actually do have I am curious about something about Bernie Sanders, because I was reading in Jewish Currents, there's this article about older Jewish Americans who are radical, like politically, who are also really hesitant to support Bernie Sanders. I kind of wanted to get your insight, Ellie, on why you think that is.
Honestly, I want to read that article. I think I Instapapered it, but I have not actually read it yet. So I don't actually know that phenomenon too well, so I would be talking out of my ass. I'm interested, though. It's interesting.
It's like how old people start fucking again in the old folks' home.
No, I wonder if it's because they think he's unelectable, or if they feel like he diverges somehow ideologically from them. But I need to read it. So
okay,
because it's interesting that black voters were skeptical about Obama until he won.
Right?
What was it
right.
Iowa? I forget.
Yeah.
So it might be somewhat similar in the attitude, but because they're on the left, I don't know if it's something else as well.
Yeah, I mean the black voter comparison thing does kind of make sense, because because with that, you have to follow the main electorate, or you'll be accused of splintering off and fucking the whole thing up or whatever.
I guess in general, though, not that particular subset, but just the Jewish Americans in general. How do you? What is your sense of the attitude towards the potential Jewish president for the first time in Bernie Sanders
among Jewish Americans? Because I don't really. I have to be honest.
You speak for all of them.
Yeah,
that's what I was told.
I'm self-aware enough to know that I am in a ideological bubble, and I'm happy to be in this fucking bubble. But even within my bubble, I have a friend who doesn't think that America is ready to elect a Jewish president. That there's too much beneath the surface anti-Semitism that will, and it's going to be so easy to to smear him as a Bolshevik, that kind of thing. And he gives certain ammunition towards that when with his socialism, and so it's going to be easy for.
That's not a smear.
No, exactly. But I mean, it's going to be easy for these characters who it's going to be easy for anti-Semites to just regurgitate shit that we've seen for 100 years, and so. In my view, it's not going to against Trump. I think Bernie can win. I think his the message that he has and the authenticity that he has shown. I mean, I think that's his core defining element of his appeal, that he has been so consistent on human rights issues, including healthcare, etc. That I think that's going to overpower, the inevitable images of him as this Bolshevik vampire with tentacles. So others might disagree on that, but
can I throw out a weird take on this?
Yeah, sure.
And let me know what you think of it, because I have no idea. I'm also speaking here as a comedian and an asshole, and this is probably a dumb thing that just occurred to me. But I think something I've been trying to figure out for a while just popped into my head, and I just was able to articulate, which is that I don't think smearing someone as an anti-Semite in Europe probably worked because
as a Jew, you mean?
Or either side of the issue, even
okay.
or in Europe, because that there's a closer history, and here's what I'm getting at. I'm from a part of the country where I often hear people go "Oh, Bernie's going to get smeared as an anti-Semite," and I go, where I'm from, people don't even know what a Jew is. How is that? How would they even? Or he's going to get smeared as a Jew, rather. Right, people are going to be afraid to elect a Jew, and I go, when I was growing up, people didn't even understand, because we didn't live around a community of Jews. So you're talking about a large chunk of America that doesn't even have the understanding of what that is enough to hate that thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, maybe. But I do think that certain archetypes of racism and bigotry might not be aware of it. But if the Republicans start saying this man wants to take your money, I mean, even though they never met a Jew, it might touch on something that, right?
Yeah. And a lot of times you don't.
It could be Middle Easterners and Mexicans last time around. This time it could be the big bad Jew or something like that.
Sure.
Okay, yeah, fair.
But I mean, right? It's well taken point though. Where are you from in Texas?
I grew up in Houston.
Oh.
And I don't know. I mean, it's I don't know if it's specific to the part of the city I was in or just Texas in general.
Okay.
But I just then I moved to New York, and now obviously I know a million more Jews.
Yeah.
But
you have Kinky Friedman. At least.
We did have Kiki Friedman. Yeah,
he died. I don't remember.
I don't think he died, but he went away after a while. He ran for governor at one point, and he was Kinky Friedman, and I don't know. He just became a weirdo townie after a while. I lived in Austin for a while, which is also extremely white middle class place, and so I don't know. I mean, I guess the concept I was trying to get at, and this is definitely more from a joke writer's brain, is I don't even know about that thing enough to be able to hate it correctly. How,
right.
Well, that hasn't stopped, many people from hating.
That's such is the nature of hate.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, right. Fair. I don't want to just fucking do a full-on Will Mennick or Chapo thing, but we should address this Bret Stephens article because it's pretty crazy. Bret Stephens wrote December 30th in the New York Times. I think so. Yeah. A piece called I just lost it. Here it is. The Secrets of Jewish Genius.
Ashkenazi brain size.
Yeah, where he, I guess, was trying to make an argument pro-Jewish, but he cited a bunch of...
fit, Ellie, was it tough to fit that brain in Jake's doorway? I know you got a big noggin there.
Yeah, exactly. It was
so much knowledge.
We had to go sideways.
Yeah.
Okay.
Big doorway.
Yeah. I mean, Bret Stephens' piece was the kind of thing, if you go to some kind of born again Jewish yeshiva trying to get people into and I think Bret actually grew up not maybe Jewishly knowledgeable or religiously observant, and then he got into it later. So it is actually possible that's exactly what he's regurgitating. It's kind of like these missionaries within the Jewish world who are trying to get you into Judaism, and some of the stuff that they say is look at all these great achievements, Jewish Nobel Prize winners, etc. I mean, the kind of things he was saying was just like one step removed from that. It was on the same level in terms of scholarship, certainly, and he just like Googling shit Googling shit and then getting white supremacist sites that he probably actually agrees with regardless. Yeah. But I mean the slippery reasoning and level of what do you call it? Just like aside from the writing level, just like the reasoning behind it was just like so seventh grade. Oh, look at Jews are so cool, kind of shit. That it's the kind of thing. It's like aside from the race science is a fireable, or you should never even have gotten your first job kind of offense.
Yeah, he's just a terrible fucking writer.
Do they just let him post his stuff directly? Like, is there any editorial oversight whatsoever? He just finds the thumbnail.
Well, after this happened, James Bennett did an interview, I guess with Politico, and he said, "Yes, we actually edited him." And Ashley Feinberg tweeted what an embarrassing thing that your editor has to actually come out and say we actually did edit him. It's so humiliating. But of course, Bret has no shame, and I don't think he's capable of that.
It doesn't seem like it. It's a very short piece that starts off with a very long editor's note, which is just. Proportionally looks
well.
Ridiculous.
The editor's note came afterwards when everyone's like right. IQ tests, etc. The editor's note also lies, and it just says that this link has been removed. Research doesn't say that they removed all instances of saying that Ashkenazi Jews are smarter than everyone else, including Sephardi Jews. So it's also like it was racist within the Jewish community as well. They didn't even touch that. It was such a lack of accountability correction.
Yeah, I mean, they might have removed a link to a specific thing that thing was in a very bad book or whatever. But the point the overall point is still bad.
Yeah.
So you can't really remove that, can you? You could remove the whole thing, I suppose, but
and then, ain't gonna happen. Yeah, well, no. Then he did something else afterwards. His next column, I remember tweeting about it, of course, but I don't remember what the actual article was. I would need my phone's charging, so I need to find it. It's fine.
That's all right. I mean, I'm sure this has been fucking covered on podcasts that. Well, I mean, I guess Chapo talked about this, right? They understand the mind of Bret Stephens more than any of us, so I'll leave it to them.
I drew it, too. I have a drawing of him.
Man, you drew everything. I think we're about an hour here, and I know we got places to be, so let's... has anybody got any last things they want to get to before we get out of here?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. I think let's go ahead and wrap up. Yeah, but before we finish up, I do know I have a lot of artsy friends that listen to this, and I wanted to ask you a little bit about how you draw. This is completely, entirely, apolitical or whatever, but, do you use pen and ink at all, or is this all tablet?
Yeah, I always get asked questions about, the Jewish condition. Never get asked about art, and I appreciate that.
I'm a fan, man.
And not just art in terms of influence. I do get asked about like Mad Magazine and shit, but I don't get asked about the actual creation of the art. And I do love talking about it, but I've no one to talk to. I didn't go to art school, so I'm in this I'm self-taught. So I wish I had a community of peers that I could actually, learn from in terms of actual. Not just style, but tools, etc. Yeah. But basically, until about 6 years ago, I guess, I was using brush and ink on Bristol board.
Yeah, I wanted to be an illustrator at one point in my life, so I got a little bit of this in my head.
Oh, cool. And you, some of your listeners are artists, you said?
Yeah, I think my friend Rory's probably listening, who does all my art. And right. We have a lot of listeners, so I'm assuming.
Cool. I love the brush and ink, but the problem was. With my style, especially, I used white a lot, and using this, I would use like this deleter 2. It's called this Japanese plaque. I don't even remember but basically it's like paint. You have to keep adding water to it because it gets hard, and it's like that stuff takes forever to dry. And if you make another mistake, or if you want to use white as an effect, etc., there's so many layers, and it got maddening. I mean. And so, even though I love it for other reasons, but when I was introduced, when I finally realized that I could maybe do this on the computer, I was introduced to a Cintiq, which is a Wacom tablet where you write on when you draw on the actual screen with a stylus. Okay. So it's not like a separate drawing thing.
That always threw me about those Wacom tablets.
Yeah, well, the Wacoms that you're drawing on, like on your
it's a separate surface
lap, and then you're seeing on the screen. I don't know if I could handle that in terms of the perception stuff, but when you're drawing on the actual screen, that was pretty. The learning curve wasn't as ominous as I had feared. And so now it's like going from black to white is a click of a button. I'm using my keyboard to change from black to white and then back again while drawing. And so I'm able to get much more of a woodcut feel because I'm doing as much carving of white out of the black as I am drawing black onto the white.
Yeah.
Which is something I could just not do with the old style. And by the way, I mean, both are good. And the speed, unfortunately, has not gone up as much as I thought. Unfortunately, I mean, it still takes me a long time to do everything, but I feel like I can sort of realize visual elements more clearly in tune with the way I want it to be, as opposed to. Maybe it might just be that like certain things are more immediate. I mean, the other hand, though, if you want to hear, I mean,
please.
One of the challenges is like with these new tools, you can start getting spoiled and adjusting your workflow to that. So it's like if I have a piece of Bristol board, I need to plot out, or, visually plot out where everything is, where the text balloons will be before I start inking, or else I'm going to screw myself into a literal corner of the panel and not have enough room. Whereas when you're doing it on a computer, you can just keep increasing the canvas space, and I keep doing that, and then like shrinking everything because it's a much more sort of free way to draw. I mean, the compositions, I always have the composition generally in my head in the beginning, but I just tinker around as I'm doing it, and it sort of like evolves as I'm drawing. But the problem is, sometimes the canvas will be like 2 feet by 2 feet at the end, like 24 inches, and like very high resolution, and my computer just like starts going crazy. And so then like the amount of time I save not having to wait for ink to dry is made up for by my computer repeatedly crashing towards the end of the drawing.
That's cool. It's always very interesting to me, because your stuff is in the style of what looks like an analog thing, and then you found a digital tool to help you like achieve that style, which it's interesting the way that,
can I one of the things I used to like about analog, I call it, just like brush and ink, is there would be some kind of pencils underneath that you didn't erase enough, and that has sort of a texture to it, which I like. When I'm doing it on the computer, I'm doing really so many layers. There's like over 100 layers of each, for each drawing, partly just because I make a new layer when I'm trying something out, and then I keep it, or I'll get rid of it, So it's an easy way, instead of having to undo 50 times, just like a new layer, when I remember to do it. So often I will just like quickly go over a layer in white and then do something new, but there are little shards that might remain from me not like erasing things completely, going over in white. So at the end, you'll see my drawings have this sort of like gritty little specks and stuff, which is somewhat analogous to the little pencil marks or eraser shavings or whatever from the Bristol board, and I like that. I'm very happy for that, and it's like those kind of imperfections I'm like very thankful for, because what scared me most about the computer was that it would all look like vector, perfect lines.
Yeah, and that's what's so cool about that like gritty style of illustration is all the little imperfections and little curly weirdo lines and stuff. Cool, I like it.
So drawing it's always been a solitary thing for you. You haven't had like a mentor or anything like that?
No, I mean, I my first semester in college, I was going to be a dual degree thing and taking art classes, but I quickly decided against that. So that was like one semester. And like in high school, I took a class at Philadelphia College of Art, actually I did a summer program once. It was like 2 weeks there in the summer. So here and there, but never a rigorous, focused college or even non-college experience.
Yeah.
Cool.
But honestly, I mean, for all that I missed by going this route, I do think that some of my favorite comic artists are autodidacts, like people who learned, like English literature, philosophy, or whatever, liberal arts basically, and and whether or not they learned art in a formal capacity, they have other knowledge and hopefully also experience that they bring to the art from the outside. I think that's good.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, especially in terms of comics, because like you gotta. Come on, you want to be able to say something through the fucking art of the comic, you know? It's not just a thing that looks aesthetic and pretty. Totally cool. Well, that's fucking rad. It's good to hear. I think we should do some plugs and get out of here, because I gotta go tell a new joke I wrote about Zoomer veterans to a crowd that won't like it. I got a new bit. I did it on 51st Jokes the other night about how we can't send these goddamn Zoomers to war because they're too weird. And I think it's doing pretty well. But the second part of it is that the veterans are going to be too weird. And it goes in a very anti-veteran direction. And that's what I'll be working on tonight in my craft, trying to figure out how to make that a little bit less offensive, but still mean enough to be funny. So, yeah. Oh, also, if you want to see me do stand-up and you live in Columbus, Ohio, or any of the surrounding areas, I'm doing a set with Street Fight, our homies, the podcast of legend. We're doing like a live, or they're doing a live variety show that I'm just going to be on the 24th of this month. And the 14th, next week, we will be doing a live Pod Damn America debate roast again at the Secret Loft in Manhattan. I hate these shows, but you know what? We gotta keep doing them because they won't stop doing these debates. I'm just kidding. They're fun, but they're so fucking long. I think that's it for me. Also sign up for our Patreon, etc. You know, support the show. Anders, you got anything to plug?
At Anders Lee here on Twitter, and if you are in Vermont, our beautiful boys' hometown of Burlington, I will be coming there February 29th, so you have a lot of time to get tickets. At 8 p.m. at the Revelry Theater, I'm going to be doing Dummy, which is my show about the history of the autistic spectrum, as well as, you know, what it means to be, what it actually means, which is a very nebulous thing, but it's a fascinating history. I talk about the history of the eugenics movement and how that has to do with the autism diagnosis. But it's a comedy show. It's a lot of fun. So come on out. Feb 29, Burlington, Vermont, at the Revelry Theater.
All right. Ellie, you got anything you'd like our listeners to know about?
Patreon, Eli Valley. That's pretty much all right. I mean, sound good?
Yeah, for sure.
My book, Diaspora Boy, came out a couple years ago.
That's what I was trying to remember. Diaspora Boy. Check that out. And check out the illustrations in the Chapo book, of course.
Yeah, and the Chapo book and Instagram and Twitter, my name.
Okay. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you for having me.
Yep.
Thanks for coming on.
Cool.